The Candid Frame is supported by donations by listeners just like you. Help us to bring you great conversations with great photographers. Support the show today with your monthly contribution through our Patreon effort at patreon.com/The Candid Frame, or click on the link in the show notes or the website at thecandidframe.com. Thank you.
This is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame. When it comes to street photography, there are some photographers you immediately associate with certain places. You say Joel Meyerowitz, and you think New York. Gary Winogrand, Southern California. Daido Moriyama, Japan. Matt Stewart, London. Though these photographers have photographed in many different locations, they are intimately connected to these places. You can say the same thing about photographer Fadi BouKaram, whose life and work is connected to his homeland of Beirut, a country that has unfortunately had to contend with years of civil war and then occupation. And though these events have resulted in painful experiences and memories for this photographer, Fadi has and continues to discover and capture beauty in the land that he calls home. Well, Fadi, welcome to The Candid Frame. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to talk first, before we talk about photography, about growing up in Lebanon, because you grew up there during the Civil War and the occupation. And I really would like to hear your story in terms of what it was like for you and your family growing up during that time.
Well, you know, I was a kid when during the Civil War. So the Civil War started in 1975. And I was born in late 1978, and it ended in 1990. So to me, it represents all my childhood. But the thing is, as hard as it was, and it was awful, I thought that this was normal. I thought that this is how everybody lived everywhere else in the world. I mean, it didn't start occurring to me that this was a singular, or not singular, but a rare occurrence in the world until I entered into my teens. So yes, it was hard, but at the same time, that was normal life to us. I thought everybody grew up in a bomb shelter. So
in terms, I know a lot of people sort of focus on the violence, and
yes.
I'm more curious about the day to day, in terms of how you interact with other family members, neighbors, friends, because you still have to sort of live out your life in the midst of all that unpredictability and all that chaos, especially with the perspective of adulthood. When you look back at it,
yes,
what were some of the sort of things that you realized were unusual, that were odd, that were not normal?
Well, the one thing mainly that wasn't completely normal is that the school year, at least 3 or 4 of my school years when I was growing up, were never complete. Which means it's like we had to cut the year short at some point because there was war. And then the next year we do like a concentrated program so that we would follow up. So that part was a little bit, that's how you realize that there's something a little bit off. Mm-hmm. As in the day-to-day thing, this is like you grow up being cautious that you cannot go certain places, that you have to be contained within your neighborhood, even within the apartment building where we grew up. Because I remember that the hallway, there was like a big hallway in the apartment building, and that's where we were allowed to play. We weren't allowed to go outside, except sometimes when we would sneak out. But I think for me, that created the sense as I grew older, when I started traveling, I wanted to see the world as kind of a reaction of being cooped up in that hallway for so many years.
Both of my parents grew up in a dictatorship in the Dominican Republic during the 40s, yes. 50s. And from what I've gotten from other family members, because my parents were never really upfront about talking to me about it. They just felt like, that's behind us. Why do you want to bring that up? But in talking to other family members, one of the things that I think life under a dictatorship had was this sense of paranoia that you constantly had all the time, that you had to live with. Not just in terms of violence, but just in terms of mistrust. you had to be very careful about who you talked to about what, and that sort of was something that sort of colored how they saw other people. And I was wondering whether there was anything similar that you experienced growing up in Lebanon.
That actually happened after the Civil War ended. Because during the Civil War, it wasn't the system itself where it's like we weren't paranoid of whatever government we had. If anything, we didn't have any form of government. It's called the Civil War, yes, but there were many foreign parties involved in it. So it was the Lebanese against other Lebanese. It was the Palestinians. It was the Israelis. It was the Syrians. And they were all fighting each other at one point. And what happens during these times is that you start having these enclaves, like where the neighborhood where I'd live, it used to be that it was homogenous and everybody, like there wasn't that sense of mistrust until the last couple of years of the war, where people within that same neighborhood started fighting each other and all that, and then people started getting cautious. And even after the Civil War ended, there was still the presence in the areas where we lived of the Syrian army, and they were known to be a police state. So people were scared the whole time. And how, not to jump ahead to photography, but even after the war ended and the Syrians were gone and the Israelis were gone, when you wanted to take photographs of people, you would always see this fear on people's faces of being photographed because they didn't know if this was going to go to somewhere, to a government place, like something like that. Eventually, it passed away. But with the refugee crisis in Lebanon, in Syria, when the Syrians started coming to Lebanon, you could start feeling this all over again from the Syrian refugees. You would be taking photos and you would sense that they were deathly, they were afraid so much, which for me was enough of a reason to stop shooting, street photography in these areas, because it's really not worth it. Why do you want to scare people half to death? They were living in a police state, and this is the result of it. So it's not worth it.
When you had the opportunity to see images during that time, how did that jive with your experience of your life there? Did you see that there was a disparity there? Did you think it was an accurate reflection of what was going on? How did you sort of perceive photography during that time?
Let me put it this way. When you grow up, in a war zone, and especially the last 2 years of the war, we're talking like 88, 89, a little bit of 1990. It was so violent in the areas where we live that you invariably develop some form of PTSD. And it takes time to get over these things. However, when it comes to photography specifically, since you mentioned it, the first time when I started seeing extensive photos of the Lebanese war was seeing Don McCullen's book, which is Beirut. And I didn't buy the book. I just saw the photos online. And the first time I actually started seeing the photos, they were to me so real as to what I experienced that I immediately could not continue looking. Mm-hmm. And it's the main reason why I can't bring myself to actually buy the book. It's still raw, even, 25, 27 years down the line.
Wow.
So yeah, it does reflect the reality of what we used to live. And unfortunately, I still haven't gotten over it completely when it comes to that.
You said that part of having this experience was this desire to travel the world and discover how other people lived.
Yes.
Tell me about those first experiences and how that sort of gave you a perspective in terms of not only how life was, but how you could and did interact with other people.
After I graduated from college and I did military service, I used to work as a computer programmer. So part of my job was to go to Dubai a lot because our company was there. So the first time seeing people, it wasn't that much of a difference. I mean, yes, they are different people, but we still could communicate. There's a similarity in the culture, even though they're not completely similar, but there's just a little bit of similarity that I didn't get to experience the whole difference. My first time was actually to go to a foreign country, like a real foreign country, was when I went to the United States in 2004. It was just for a visit. And it was surreal in that, how normal everything looked. Not normal, like how organized, how people were living as if they haven't lived a war in their life. I mean, it's obvious now to me, but at the time, you don't realize it until you start talking to the people, right? And a year after that, as it happened, I moved to the United States to do my master's in San Francisco. And unfortunately, since we're still talking about the war, it was a result of the war thing, because in 2005, the prime minister in Lebanon got assassinated with a big, TNT bomb, and I happened to be present at the scene, and I got slightly wounded with that. So I was like, you know what, I'm done. I can't deal with that anymore. So I just moved to the U.S. I applied to the first university that would take me, and I just went there. And that whole move to me kind of changed my life, because it allowed me to experience life differently, a life that is unstressed, a life that has no wars. It's weird to say it now, but yeah.
And how did photography come to play a role in your life?
Photography, I used to mention that when we grew up, we didn't have a camera at the house, right? Photography wasn't something important. So it was that whenever there was an important occasion, let's say, I don't know, Christmas, something like that, there would be someone else from the family, the extended family, and they would take a picture, and then we would get it. So from all the time from when I was born, me and my siblings, until I was in my teens, we have one photo album. I think it's just like barely one photo album. And this album had a lot of people who were, they weren't in Lebanon anymore, or they were dead. Because of the war, so many people left the country. I mean, my extended family is spread all over the world, between Australia, the Caribbean, and the US and all that. So these photos kind of represent all these people who don't exist anymore. So there's this whole memory attachment to it. So that was my first this realization that photography is that important in terms of memories. But I didn't get, I didn't start doing it until I moved, until I was in San Francisco. That's when I first started.
And was it a class where did someone
No, I was, I'm an engineer, and I was doing a master's in finance in San Francisco. Okay. So I have nothing to do with that. So it was, funny enough, when I moved to the U.S., I was working, and it was, I filed my first taxes. I didn't know that people did that. And then it turns out I was owed a refund. I was like, oh, extra money. So I bought myself a camera. That's it. So I bought myself a camera due to how important I thought photography was to me. And from that, I wish I could say like I was photographing important things, but no, I was photographing homeless people in San Francisco. Why? Because that was part of the culture shock for me. Because even with all the wars and whatever happened in Lebanon, I had never seen a homeless person in my life. Whereas San Francisco was literally littered. Like there were homeless people everywhere.
Right.
So now I understand. Now I'm more, I'm aware of the problem. But at the time, me being Lebanese going there, I thought that this was extraordinary in how bad it was. And I was taking photos of that, thinking that this is something that should be documented. Of course, I was, ignorant about these things. And then you realize about the exploitative factor, and you stop doing that. But that was my first experience really photographing people.
And how did you sort of develop that an awareness of sort of the legacy, the history of photography? When did you start determining that this was something that you wanted to do seriously?
It was actually after I came back to Lebanon, because I was in San Francisco from 2005 to 2009. After that, I came back to Lebanon, and I joined a group called the Beirut Street Photographers. And during that time, a photographer called David Gibson came from the UK. He's a member of In Public, and he was giving a workshop. So I decided I wanted to attend the workshop. And the first day of the workshop was just David showing us the history of photography, from Mario Giacomelli to Cartier-Bresson to Douaneau, to all these people, from the start until these days. So you could say that was an eye-opening day for me. I had no idea that this sort of beauty existed. So that was my first day of actually being hooked that this is what I want to do.
And how did your approach start to change as a result of that time with David?
It changed to the worse, actually, to begin with.
Okay.
Because when you're looking at street photography, the late history of it, we're talking like the early 2000s until now, there's a lot of this approach of, the puns, the jokes, the juxtapositions, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So this is what we're shown. And at first, when you don't know, you think, this is nice. I want to try that. And this was one of the most frustrating periods of starting to do photography, because at the same time, it's difficult to do these things. And also, when you do it, you realize, well, so what am I doing? What's the point of this? It's like you start to feel the cheapness of it all. That's what I mean. That was the first phase of me doing photography. And fortunately, I realized that I need to change my approach, and then I changed.
Expand a little bit about the cheapness. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, okay. The thing is, you see a lot of photos you used to see. Now it's not as common anymore. But let's say you see a photo of someone who is overweight in front of a poster that's an ad for a gym calling lose weight something.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or an ad for someone who is, for glasses, and someone who's blind. Like, this is the kind of photos that I used to see. And looking at them now, for me, it's like, what are you trying to say? Why are we joking about these things? And why are we trying to be smart about photography? I'm sure there are people who still like to do that, but for me, this is kind of pointless.
Mm-hmm.
What are you adding, or what are you developing in this whole path that is photography?
So what did you start turning your eye to that was more, in your perspective, more substantive?
The people who live around me. Kind of, I don't want to cheapen the expression, but a sense of time and a sense of place. That's what I wanted to do. Trying to capture something extraordinary within the ordinary. Make the banal, make a boring scene interesting visually. This is what just photographing the people around me without trying to be smart about it.
I got it. Yeah. What were part of some of the challenges for you in achieving that and being able to do that?
As I mentioned first, it was you have to get, the people you're photographing, you don't want them to be scared of you. I'm not talking generally in the world. I'm talking here in Lebanon specifically, because there was a period that they were still coming out of the war and they were still afraid of the cameras and all that. So there was the two challenges actually. One, I wanted to not be afraid of taking photos of these people because I'm shooting, candid. And two, you don't want to scare these people themselves. You want to, if they see you taking a photo, you want to develop the skills so that they're not afraid, because it's always about the subject for me. It's like, it's not worth it if you take a good photo and then scare someone half to death. That's very selfish, I think. So these are the things that I had to learn to do, and I'm still learning.
So what exactly did you have to learn? I mean, because when I look at your work, you're not working with a 70 to 200 at a distance. You seem to be working with a moderate to wide angle lens. You're fairly close.
Yes. So
beyond the sort of the technical aspects of the camera itself, what did you have to learn to do in order to be able to get up close to people and also often maybe diffuse the situation or make it so that it didn't escalate? Well,
it's going to sound cheesy, but the most important rule really is just to smile. It's just, I'm taking photos of people who are scared of the camera, but they're also scared of strangers because this is people coming out of the war. Mm-hmm. And this is not just them. This is also me. I'm Lebanese just like them, and I used to not like strangers, and I still have an issue with developing a rapport with the people I'm photographing here in Lebanon. So the first thing is just that don't be menacing. Don't come with the body language of someone who is menacing or threatening. Be, smiling. If I took a photo of someone and they object and they said, delete my photo, it's like, yes, I will delete your photo.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm not here to, you don't want to make enemies. Why? A photo is not worth it. I'm not a photojournalist, so it's not what I'm doing.
Right. Do you find that there's a difference generationally in terms of the people who react to, your photographs, people your age or older as compared to people who are younger who grow up in this sort of cell phone age?
Yes, but the opposite of what you'd imagine, really.
Really? Okay.
Because it's weird to me that here you'd find the older generation now are more receptive of being photographed than the younger generation. But that's for a completely different reason, I think. Because now, you mentioned the cell phone generation, right?
Yeah.
This is the generation that has everything manicured. I'm not talking about the look, I'm talking about the photos. Like the Facebook photos, the Instagram, they have to be perfectly posed, perfectly lit, that approach. So I think this is the reason why the idea of someone taking a candid photo of them that does not fit the image that they have of themselves, that's a problem.
One of the things about practicing street photography is like most people don't have any concept of it, regardless of where you're shooting. But but especially there, where someone with a camera who looks like they're pretty serious about it, we're assuming to be some sort of journalist. So when people, see you, they approach you and they ask, "What are you taking pictures for?"
Yes.
How do you explain it, and what is their reaction to you? Do they think you're nuts? Do they have any understanding of what you're doing?
Well, I've developed a mini scenario that I started believing myself, because at first it was kind of like made up, which the first time someone asked me and I didn't have an answer, I said, well, I'm taking photos of Beirut, and I'm not planning to do anything with them for now, but hopefully in 10 years, if I have something good enough, I want to make a book about it, about what Beirut looked like in these years. So that came up as kind of a mini lie, I think.
Yeah.
But then the more I started repeating it, the more I thought, well, why not? I mean, why not do a book eventually about Beirut during these years? And the thing is, I didn't expect people would react so positively about it. So for them, it was like, oh, good luck, and then they'd give me their contacts in case I want to publish the book, they'd want to see it and all that. And of course, there's no book yet. There's no, it's just an idea that would take years to happen. But that's what I did.
When you live in a place for a very long time, there's a lot that you kind of just take for granted. You see it, but you don't really see it. You don't really take it in and observe it. And I'm wondering how having a camera and being so dedicated to your photography sort of changed the way that you saw Lebanon, and what things did you discover as a result of having the camera in your hand?
Well, you mentioned about, taking photos over and over at the same place. And of course, there's this challenge of keeping like a fresh eye on a location that you're seeing over and over again. And back in the day, in between 2009 and 2012, I used to work in a bank downtown. So the only photography that I did mostly was during my lunch break. Every lunch break for 1 hour, I'd take the camera and I'd walk around the neighborhood where where we're located. And doing that for 3-4 years is kind of like you have to be forced to see something new every single time. What I did learn about it, and that's after photographing, let's say, in Lebanon and in San Francisco and in New York, that doing street in Lebanon has a little bit more difficulty when it comes to people, because you don't see this spontaneity or abandon that with which people behave on the street. In Lebanon, people are more reserved because there's this whole idea about they care about how they are perceived by other people. So in New York, you might see someone running on the street. In San Francisco, you might see someone, walking with a dog and an umbrella, and they're eating ice cream, feeding the dog ice cream and all that. You won't find that in Lebanon because that would be considered inappropriate. So it was a bit of a challenge to actually find candid moments that are more subdued than where you'd find somewhere else.
You know, one of the projects that you worked on was you came to the United States and you started photographing towns with the name of Lebanon.
Yes.
Across the country.
That was my last project.
So tell me about the inception of that project and why you felt it was important for you to do.
Okay. Well, that project is actually, it goes back to when I first moved to the United States and the reason why I moved to the United States. So in 2007, the Street View in Google Maps was starting to become more, advanced. And I was in San Francisco and I wanted to see a street view of the location where the bomb came up, where the prime minister was assassinated. Right. So I just Googled Lebanon in the Google Maps. And instead of giving me my Lebanon, it gave me Lebanon, Oregon, which is the closest one to California. At first, I had no idea. I was like, why would there even be one Lebanon, in Oregon? I thought it was interesting, but then I let it go. But then eventually I found out that there's a Lebanon in Pennsylvania, a Lebanon in Kentucky and all that. So I thought, well, how many are there? So I compiled a list because the U.S., they have public records of all the town names in all the country. So it turns out there's 47 of them. And I thought, well, that'd be a good retirement project to do when I, when I stop working, decades and decades ahead. But the idea kept in my mind until December 2015 when I was in Baghdad and I had a mini experience too related to the war. And I decided, what, maybe that's a good idea to quit my job. I need a break. So I just came back and, resigned and left the U.S.
So tell me about visiting all these different towns called Lebanon. It must have been an interesting experience interacting with people, especially when they discovered that you were from another country called Lebanon.
Yeah.
What did you learn about how people sort of perceived your country and how you sort of perceived them?
To be honest here, I chose the timing of the trip to coincide with the elections because, if I wanted to do a trip, I thought, why not do two in one, if you will. Mm-hmm. I left, it was between October 2016 and March 2017. So, as I was researching, I realized that a lot of these Lebanons, most of them actually, are in the middle of the country, right? I had never been in the middle of the country except once. So I used to go to New York a lot. I used to live in San Francisco. I had no idea what's in the middle. So what I knew of these people was from what other Americans used to tell me and what characters you see in movies and stuff like that. So I thought I might have to be really careful about these things, except until I actually did the trip. And I still have to say, I was really enormously surprised at how nice these people were to me. They didn't have to, or maybe I didn't expect them to be. So I had really low expectations. So when they were this hospitable, it was very heartwarming to me. So.
I grew up here in this country, but I had sort of the same experience when I started visiting the middle part of the country.
Yes.
You realize that, the people who are more paranoid and reticent about talking to strangers are people who are on the coastal cities, New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco. It's like, you go out into you go into the inner part of the country and it's amazing how easy it is to strike up a conversation with a perfect stranger. Yes.
Well, I got a story here is that, believe it or not, before, after working at a bank, I used to work in a consulting company where we used to, consult, basically do work for the IRS to try to catch people who are U.S. expats who don't pay taxes. That's the summary of it, right?
Okay.
So there was one place where a guy was living off the grid because he doesn't like the government and all that. So the type, it's kind of like they're just like anti-government and all that. So I wanted to talk to him, and surprisingly, he was so nice talking to me. I'm Lebanese. I look I look either Arab or Hispanic, depending on where you go in the country, what people, assume that you are.
Right.
That didn't matter at all to him. He was as nice as possible. But then he asked me what I used to do for a living. And I mentioned the IRS, and he went crazy and refused to talk to me after that. So he was fine with me being from Lebanon. He was not fine with me helping the IRS because they're robbing the American people. That's what I think. Oh, so, as far as stereotypes go, it's like this was not a racist man, apparently, but he was that much anti-government that he would refuse to talk to me after that.
That's great. How did your approach to photography, how was it different as a result of doing this project?
It was the first time where I knew I had to force myself to talk to people, because I know this was not going to be, me walking on the streets and taking photos left and right. Mm-hmm. For one, there were no people on the streets. Most of these towns I was in, they had less than 1,000 people. So it's not like you're going to see, loads of people walking on the street and all that. What I did was 2 years ago, I was in Istanbul. And I was it was at Photo Istanbul, and I was attending a talk by Anders Peterson. And he talked about how he approaches photography. He said he goes to a bar, the same bar every single time. And then he goes with his camera, puts his camera on the table or on the bar, just to announce to everybody that he's a photographer. And then he would go and talk to people and ask them, can I photograph you naked? Well, that's Anders Peterson. I was not going to do that myself. His photography. Yeah. So I decided to adopt what he said, minus the naked part. It was just, even like when you talk to people and you show them the camera, it's like, can I have a conversation with you? And then we start talking. And then it's like, well, can I take pictures while we are talking? And most of them were actually very accommodating. So that's the approach. In the middle of the country, you have 2 or 3 kinds of places where you go to meet the people in small towns. Right. You either go to the bar or you go to the churches. Bars are more interesting than churches in terms of the photographic opportunities. But yeah, I spend a lot of times in bars. So.
And one of the things about doing that, especially in a small town, is that within no time, everybody knows who that guy is.
Oh, hell yeah.
They spread the word quickly, and all of a sudden, I heard about you.
Well, okay, let me tell you this one. I was in Lebanon, South Dakota. By the way, it's like now I'm used to it because the country where I live is called Lebanon, but most of the towns in the U.S., these towns are called Lebanon, not Lebanon. So, they made sure to tell me to say Lebanon, not Lebanon, so that I don't seem like a foreigner.
Okay.
As if my looks won't give me away. But different story. I was in Lebanon, South Dakota, and I was in a bar. And the bar is run by the municipality and 3 women who are the barmaids, all in their 70s. The whole town has 36 people. So I was talking to these barmaids, great people and all that, but the first couple of days where I went, there was no one. However, on the 3rd day, they told me, well, you can come on Thursday because it's dart night. It's darts night, and all the town's going to be there. So I go on Thursday, and lo and behold, the whole town was there. And as soon as I walk in, one of the barmaids tells the people, hey, this is Fadi. So everybody, it's like, they scream. It's like, hey, Fadi, welcome, blah, blah. It was like a scene from Cheers where that guy, Norm, when he walks into the bar and everybody screams Norm.
Yeah.
It was like, I hadn't met any of these people, but word spread so fast that as soon as I walked in, people started coming, talking. It was like, hey, you're from Lebanon. They told us about you and all that. So that was a bit of a surreal moment, but it was nice.
So how did, you being able to have the opportunity to practice approaching people, talking with people, help you with the work that you've done subsequently?
I'm not exactly a very sociable person, let's say. I usually don't like talking that much to strangers and all that. And believe it or not, that helped me a lot because when I first started talking to people, I was a little bit shy because these are strangers. So I wouldn't do that much talking. I would ask a few questions and then I'd be mostly silent. Mm-hmm. And given that these small towns, there's a lot of older generation there, you would not imagine how much these people would talk if you just give them the opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
So me not talking actually helped because they kept talking and talking. I mean, I was listening. It's not like I wasn't paying attention. And for them, me listening to them, which maybe they don't have that many opportunities for people to listen to them, I don't know. But that made the rapport much, much easier because it's as if we've known each other for a long time just from me listening to them.
Yeah, and I bet you they had some stories that they've told 1,000 times to you. You were
Right?
hearing it for the very first time.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're part of a collective, the Observed Collective. Tell me about how that came about.
Yes. How did it start?
Yeah, how did it start and how did you become a part of it?
We've all known each other from Flickr. I mean, back in 2013, Flickr was much more active than what it is these days. I mean, right now it's not that much. But back in the day, there was these groups and we were learning a lot from Flickr and all that. So we were in this group, critique group, and we kind of became friends online. And then one of the people there, her name is Danielle Houghton, she said, well, how about we make a collective? And the whole group was only maybe 16 or 17 people. And of these people, we, the initial 14 said, well, yeah, let's do a collective. I mean, of course, we respected each other's work photographically, but more important than that, we actually liked each other as people. We got along. And I mean, it kind of seems like an obvious requirement, but
right.
On Flickr, there was, it's not always that people got along that well. There was a lot of bickering and all that. So it just happened that we were in a group where people liked each other. So we said, yeah, let's do it. So.
Yeah, there's this amazing talented people on there. I was looking at the work, and it is not only is it diverse and wide ranging, but the compositionally, I see people doing some things that really are exciting. For you as a photographer,
I can't say thank you for them, but I would agree because, like I said, I love their work. So
what have you learned as far as being in an environment where people are not just generous with liking something, but don't hesitate in terms of giving you a really honest and detailed critique of your work?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned because just a few months ago, I was in our private Facebook group. I was blaming them for making me, for getting me to a place where I actually quit my day job and pursuing photography. Because if it weren't for you people, I wouldn't have done that. Because seriously, I mean, all the development that we did in terms of supporting each other, it's not just about the critique. It's also about the resources. I mean, learning photography is not just about our work, but about other people's work out there. So it's always like, well, look at that person who's doing that kind of work. And it reminds me of your work this way and this way. And maybe you should follow this approach. So this kind of, generous environment, as you mentioned, that was just, it fosters good work. That's it.
So what finally, made you take the leap to go into a photographic career rather than the business that you had been in before?
Like I mentioned earlier, it was just this Baghdad trip that wasn't exactly perfect, where I thought I need a break from this sort of Middle Eastern world. Mm-hmm. I mean, during my work, I used to have to do a lot of travels, and that trip there reminded me a little bit too much of the times of the war in Lebanon. So as it always seems the case, like my move to the United States in 2005 was triggered by the assassination, and my quitting my day job for good was triggered by this whole trip to Baghdad. So I guess I got to be thankful somehow to these experiences. But yeah, it was that trip.
And what kind of work are you interested in doing? Because a lot of people are probably familiar with you in terms of your street work, but what kind of photographic work are you hoping to achieve?
Well, first thing first, I want to repeat the trip because I'm not done. I mean, 6 months. I was for 6 months in the U.S., but 5 months on the road. These were good, but these are nowhere near enough for an actual project where I want to do. And the second project, which I'm hoping would be at least funded by our government, because I mean, the first trip I did it for my savings, which is I knew no one was going to fund it. So I was like, okay, let me kill my savings account. But now that it's done, I'm going to try to get the government to fund me. which is I'm going to try and do kind of like try to find the early Lebanese immigrants of the 19th century and how their culture changed and what they have retained from their old culture and all that. I mean, any opportunity to allow me to go on the road again and talk to people and take photos. This was too good of an experience for me not to repeat. And I want to do it again.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend another photographer for listeners to discover and explore. And it can be anyone. It can be someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why?
Just because I was just messaging her right now, Kate Kirkwood.
Okay. And why?
Why? Because Kate, to me, she has defined what is rural street photography. I mean, when I went to the US, I photographed in rural places and all that. But she is the standard of what is rural photography, on how to apply street photography aesthetics on the animals who are on her farm. And this is, I love her work. I can't say, I was just messaging her as like, come on, do a book already. So, yeah.
I've not heard of her. I look forward to checking out her work. That's a great suggestion.
She's absolutely amazing.
Oh, awesome, man. Well, thank you, Fadi. It was a real pleasure to have a chance to stay down.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It was nice. Thank you. I love that.
Thanks again for joining us and for Fadi for sharing his story. To find out more about him and his work, visit FadiBouKaram.com. And thank you for your continued support of The Candid Frame. If you haven't already, please take the time today to write a review in the iTunes Store. Your ratings and comments help people to discover the great conversations that we offer here at TCF. You can also support the show by making a monthly contribution through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/The Candid Frame, or you'll find a link in the show notes and the Candid Frame website. Or if you just want to make a one-time contribution to the show, you can do so via PayPal by clicking on our donate button on the Candid Frame website or the show notes. To access our complete archive of interviews, download the free Candid Frame app, available for Apple iOS, Android, and Windows. It's the fastest and most convenient way to hear and save any of the great interviews we present here at TCF. Links for each can be found in the show notes and the website at thecandidframe.com. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at simply @IbadianX. And this is Ibadian X, and this is The Candid Frame.